welcome back to my channel. Hope you are all doing well today. Tonight I am making one of my favorite kinds of videos to make. I am doing a Q&A. I love doing Q&As because I am celebrating both my 3-year anniversary here on Booktube as well as reaching 700 subscribers. So I put out kind of a call for questions and you guys did not disappoint. I've got a good list here. I have kind of condensed a couple of them that were similar and I've put them into sections. It's all organized. So my sections, I'm going to talk about myself. I'm going to talk about current reading habits. I'm going to talk about Booktube, and then, oh yeah, I'm going to talk about my childhood. I got one childhood question. And then homeschooling and parenting, which I was actually kind of surprised to get so many homeschooling and parenting questions. I've often thought about talking about homeschooling on this channel, and I just wasn't sure if anybody would be interested in that. But anyway, we'll get to those at the end. So let's just dive right in because there's a lot. All right, first question. If you were asked to become curator of a museum for a week, which museum would you pick? That's hard. They're all hard. I don't like to narrow things down. But for this one, it's not necessarily a museum, but it kind of is. And that is Kensington Palace in London. If I could kind of be like in charge of some stuff there, that'd be fantastic. I toured Kensington Palace in 2013 and I just saw so many amazing things. Now, I don't know how much of the stuff I'm going to talk about is there now because it's been 13 years, but when I was there in 2013, there were clothing collections from Princess Diana, from Queen Elizabeth II, some of Queen Victoria's things, Margaret Rose's things, just some beautiful clothing, all on display on mannequins, and just a lot of times there'd be some kind of like an interactive or even just a poster next to it showing at what event the person wore the outfit. And it was really neat, especially in the case of Princess Diana, because so many of, the things that they showed were iconic things that I remembered from my childhood. And that was just fantastic. I remember like a little dollhouse display. I remember, this is something I'll remember for my entire life. There is a room and it was filled with like, I don't know what exactly these things are called, but they're like, the room was completely dark and then there were all these light boxes and they were all scenes and just lit with a light inside of this black box with a scene. I don't know how to describe it, like a shadow box maybe, or anyway, it was just beautiful. And there was like kind of like dollhouse music playing in the room, and it was just like one of the most magical experiences. We got to have tea in the orangery, so this beautiful glass walled, little like sunroom type thing, I guess we would call it here, and had a lovely tea on beautiful china, and it was just such a fantastic day. So if I could go back and kind of like get to dig into some of the vaults and closets and things and see some of that stuff again and some other things that are hidden in there, maybe not shown for the public, that would be really awesome. Next question. What is one thing you've always wanted to do but you haven't done yet? I want to go to the Concord, Massachusetts area and visit author homes. Many of our authors, especially like 19th century authors, lived in the Concord, Massachusetts area, like Louisa May Alcott, Nathaniel Hawthorne, Henry David Thoreau, Ralph Waldo Emerson. I know Longfellow has ties there, Margaret Sidney. You can go to Walden Pond and see what Thoreau, was so enchanted by. You could go to Salem and visit the places where the Salem witch trials took place. Like there's so much history and literary history there. I would love to do that. I'm gonna do that one of these days. Next question. Have you ever counted your book collection? So, no, I had never done that before. And so I took a little bit tonight and I sort of estimated. I got out my yardstick and I kind of figured like the average number of books per yard. Then I went around and measured. Anyway, it's this whole mathy thing. And I have at least 8,800 books. in this house. But that didn't count any books that belong to my children. That didn't count any books that belong to my husband. That didn't count anything in the garage or downstairs. That didn't count like the 400 books I have sitting here to go into Pango. So like books that I'm planning to keep or my family's planning to keep, like there's 7 other people who live in this house. So I would say we probably have about 10,000 books in this house. That's insane. I don't think my house is 3,000 square feet. So yeah, there's books everywhere. Right. What is your current favorite nonfiction book other than the Bible? So this was hard. Like a few ones kind of went through my head, but most recently I really enjoyed reading Agatha Christie's biography. I've talked about this in a few other videos. If I can find a specific one, I'll, put it down in the description box. But I really connected with her. And I just love the way she thinks. I love the way she looks at the world. I love what she did with her life. Just all of the adventure and travel and joy and trying new things. And she didn't take herself super seriously. She wasn't snotty or snooty, stuck up. She was just like a mom and a wife. She was a very devoted wife to her second husband. Like that was more important to her than her reading or anything else. And they just went on really cool adventures together, and he totally doted on her. And like, she just has such a neat life, and her autobiography is very in her voice. I mean, it's an autobiography, but it's just very, like, you get that. You just really get a feel for her. I loved reading that. So I guess that would be my current favorite nonfiction, but it probably sits up there with several others that I could mention. But the Meetings with Remarkable Manuscripts by Christopher de Hamel that I've been going through, I'm loving that. I really enjoyed The Bone Chest by Jarman. So there's a few, but Agatha probably is currently there in the number 1 spot. All right, if you could only own one book besides the Bible, what would it be? That is really hard too. So I was trying to think of like anthologies of books or of stories, just to kind of give myself some what's the word? I don't know, just lots of choices, right? I have a collection of Grimm's fairy tales. There's, 100 or more Grimm's fairy tales. I've had this since I was a kid, so it has that sentimental value. My mother wrote in it to me. That is, that sentimental thing that I would always have, my mother's handwriting. And I have not read more than just a few of them. And other than a couple I read a couple of years ago, all of them I have not read before like age 10, in which I probably didn't understand a whole lot. So basically what I'm getting at is I could probably read the stories in that collection several times before getting very sick of them. And it would take me so long to read them that by the time I got around, I could probably keep myself fairly occupied with those stories. If I also had a journal in which I could write down responses and wonderings and historical references and literary references, and I wonder if this word means that because it sounds like the Latin blah 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 of blah blah. Like, as long as I had some stuff to write with, then I'd probably do good with that. Not really actually what I thought I would have chosen, but I think it probably makes pretty good sense. Lots of scope for the imagination, for sure. All right, how many books do you read in a week? So that varies at different times of the year, because sometimes of the year I'm just really stinking busy, and sometimes I'm not, and sometimes I choose not to be, and it's the whole thing. But I average it out with my mathy skills, and it's about 3 books a week. So like a average novel, 280 to 300, 320-ish pages. I probably read about 3 of those a week. Next question, Jane Austen aside, what genre is your favorite and why? So right now, my current favorite genre is what I'm calling hot water bottle books. I heard someone say that the other day. I thought that was perfect. I can't really find anywhere else where anyone else said that, so I don't know if she just made it up, but I'm stealing it. That was such a great, feeling it gives you. So it's kind of like cozy vintage fiction. like cozy but realistic. Doesn't always have to have a happy, super slap happy ending, but a satisfying ending. Something that has good and bad characters, but they're not like really, really bad. Like they're bad, but they're lovable, right? Don't really need a huge plot, but I do want like lessons learned, like even small lessons learned, right? Something that I can kind of chew on a little bit and think about, maybe apply to real life or whatever, help me understand someone else better, that kind of thing. Must be completely free of any scenes. And if there's any profanity, it's got to be like really, really sparse and kind of like 19th century British profanities, like things that, you know, just those few little profanities that like the British aristocracy could get away with saying gently in women's company. That's all I will put up with. So current books that I have read similar to that are things by like D. Stevenson, things by Miss Reed. I'm really loving the Miss Reed. I'm pretty obsessed with the Thrush Green series right now. It's kind of all I'm reading. Things in that Furrowed Middlebrow Publishing group of books, right? Maybe even something like Father Brown Mysteries, or maybe some Agatha Christie, but I don't know, that one gets just a little too not so cozy. So just kind of slice of life, gentle sort of reads. Next question, what is the one book that felt the most magical to you? I actually did think of two. One is The Winter Ghost by Kate Mosse. I love that book. I've read it several times. I would probably read it every winter for the rest of my life. It's so curious and it's so just wintry. There's a historical element to the book that I wasn't aware of. It takes place in France. It's called The Winter Ghosts, but there might not necessarily be ghosts as much as just a guy who's been outside in the cold way too long. In the story, the main character does kind of solve a historical mystery that is just very interesting, and I don't know, just the whole thing is just cold, but not negative. It's like happy cold, but magical. I don't know. I loved that book. Loved it. It's fairly clean as far as I remember. There's no scenes. There might be a couple profanities, but I don't remember. And then I also was thinking of The Little White Horse by Elizabeth Goudge, which is just a really sweet story about a young girl who kind of discovers some ancestors and some mystery within her ancestry, and it makes it even more magical and better if you watch The Secret of Moonacre, which is a movie that was made kind of loosely based on the story. That is just, especially the costumes, is beautiful, so fantastic. So I would say those two. All right, of all your videos, which is your favorite? That one, yeah, that's really hard. So I like all my videos. If I didn't like it, I wouldn't put it up. I think for like videos that I worked really hard on are things like my like literary analysis videos, where I take a whole book and just talk about it for the whole video. So like Rebecca, I did last October. I worked really hard on that. I took a lot of notes, and I think like I got some insights as I was reading through, because I was purposefully reading it that time around to make a video on it. So I was kind of proud of that one. I did one on Scrooge, and just kind of like sympathetic to Scrooge. I did that a couple of years ago at Christmas time. So I'll link those below. The videos that are probably the most emotional to me would be the ones that I made in summer of 2025 when I went to England by myself. I just had a lot of like personal contemplation. So for those videos, I think most of them, I talked about like something else at the beginning, and then I like switched into footage of England. So it's kind of a whole series. I think I'm going to make a Jane Austen playlist because I don't have one yet, but I probably need one. So I'll put those on there and link that below. I kind of conquered some fears in that trip. One of them being something that I had been afraid to do for 10 years. And so those were just really special videos to make because they correlated to a really special trip, right? Where I just kind of like learned some stuff about myself. And then I think my most favorite recent videos would be my tea party videos. I made 3 tea party videos during Jane Austen July, and where I made myself like a really fancy tea, and then, you know, with like food and cream scones and dessert and tea and like all this stuff. And then I did like a evaluation, what's the right word? I don't know, reviews, I guess, on the 3-part documentary series called Jane Austen, Rise of a Genius. That's on Redbox, Amazon. And the reason why those were really special to me is because of the reaction that I got from my older daughters when they saw me making that tea. So without going into like piles of details, 2020 through like 2024 were like really, 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 really tough years for a lot of reasons for me. Very little of it had to do with, you know, what the whole world was experiencing during that time. Just things that happened personally in my life, really tough. And I just kind of pulled away from so many things that I just loved. I stopped traveling to England. I stopped doing anything regarding, you know, Jane Austen or tea parties or anything that's just like that whole thing that like my daughters had always known me for, and just, you know, literary things. It was really hard for me to get into just some of the things that I was used to always be into, it, you know, self-education, whatever. I really struggled. And there were even a couple of times when my oldest daughter, who is 26, she would mention like, where's mom? Like, she's like, I miss, you know, all your pink stuff. I miss all your tea parties. I miss all your Jane Austen. I miss your excitement about travel. I just, where, you know, I want you back. I didn't really realize how much that made my older children worry until I did those tea parties, and my 2 oldest daughters, 26 and my other daughter who just turned 20 the other day, they were just like, I would come out with my tray, you know, and they'd be sitting at the table chatting after work in the evening or whatever, and I come around with my tray and all my things, and their eyes would just light up, and they would just be like, have a great tea party, you know, and just both of them several times while I was doing that would make comments, or even just, you know, smile, and just with a happy little contented look, right? Like, mom's back. And that was just such a blessing, right? Because, you know, personally, I felt like I've been back for like a year, but there's just been things that they like picked up on, right? Where there's just things that they're starting to pick up on as I'm starting to kind of get back into the old me, right? That's just a blessing and peaceful for them to see that mom had a rough time, but, you know, things are getting back to normal again. And that was just a blessing to me also. So while what happened in my home didn't show up there on the video, the fact that I made those videos and these things happened here at home, that was just really a sweet and unexpected blessing. All right, next one. From over the years, which comment left by someone on one of your videos meant the most to you and why? That one also is really tough. It is hard to narrow it down, but I do think in general, when someone says that they can relate to what I'm saying, or they're encouraged by something I've said has given them a new perspective, like that really blesses me, because yeah, I love to come on here and talk about books, but in between the actual book talk, I want to be an encourager. I want to, you know, minister peace to people. I want to minister hope and positivity. I want to sort of show what it's like to be a middle-aged, you know, Christian mom in today's society who, you know, is focused on simple, old-fashioned, slow living, self-education, travel, you know, doing the things that make your life feel beautiful, romanticizing your life, that's the term. And I want to sort of minister that. I want to just be a happy, cozy, calm, peaceful, encouraging, positive, all those things. That's kind of what I want my channel to be. And, you know, I'm using books as something to talk about, but what I really want to do is just encourage, right? And there's just a lot of negativity out there, on YouTube and off, right? And I just want to be just a light and a happy place. When people see my videos pop up, I want them to be like, yes, she made another one, right? And they're ready for something that makes them feel positive. Next, how have you seen yourself grow and change as a booktuber? All right, so I have been on YouTube for 10, 12 years or so, but I've only been on Booktube for 3 years. Before that, I had a ministry channel, and I did Bible teaching for like 5 years. I spoke at conferences, I spoke at local things. I was just kind of like I was a Bible teacher. And when I started my Booktube channel, I was just kind of coming out of that. I was recognizing it was time to sort of wind that down. It got really negative, and it's just not what I wanted to do anymore, right? There was just a lot of negativity. It wasn't worth it to me. It was really wrecking my peace. So I started Booktube, and the ways that I have changed here. So something that has kind of changed for me is that I started off Booktube. I didn't want to talk about my faith. I just really didn't want to give people access. And so I don't think I didn't necessarily avoid talking about faith, but I didn't on purpose talk about it, right? If there was something that I recognized and something that I was reading that was, you know, biblical or God related or something that would indicate that I was a Christian, I just leave that part out of my video. For the most part, I'm sure that, you know, God popped in now and then without me recognizing it. But I just really didn't want to talk about anything that had to do with God because it was very personal, and I had given so many people so much access, and it had gotten so negative that when I thought of YouTube, I just thought of it as this negative, crazy place where everybody fights over dumb, petty things. I had some hurt, I had some frustrations, and I did not want to talk about theology. But about 8 or 9 months into it, I discovered Christian BookTube. And I, you know, just that naturally came up in my algorithm, right? Because those were, you know, some of the people that I was looking for, on top of the fact that, you know, they read everything you do and they could tell I was Christian. So they started showing a lot of Christian booktubers to me. And I started to realize that this community on YouTube was not like the community that I was coming out of with my ministry channel. And I found that people weren't preachy, they weren't negative, they weren't trying to push their own agendas. If someone said something that the person didn't agree with, they just didn't comment on that part, or they found something positive to say. Like, they treated each other with maturity and respect. Wow. And I love that. I think that glorifies God. I think the Christian BookTube community is doing a great job. I'm proud to be a part of that. So I think what has changed for me is just seeing that although I had bad experiences with faith-based channels and people, that not everybody is like that. And that it can still, that, you know, that YouTube can still be a place for believers, and it can be a positive place for believers, at least here in the BookTube community. I'm definitely seeing that. So loving that. And obviously I talk about my faith all the time. What I really love is that I have a lot of BookTube friends that aren't believers, right? But there's still that positive respect, and we just find the things that we do agree on, and we just find the things that we do like about each other's channels and stuff, right? And things that we have to offer. So I really love that too. Next question. What were your childhood top 3 books, and do you love them now? So when I was a kid, I had like 0 limits on what I could read. And when I was like grade school age, I don't think that was because my parents didn't care, because they were like really picky about what we could watch on TV. Like there was 0 MTV. We could watch VH1 for a little bit, and then my mom was like, no, never mind, you guys can't watch that. I mean, she was picky. She was very careful about the things that we were allowed to watch. Like we could not watch TV after 8 p.m., right? Because that's when they showed all the stuff that kids aren't supposed to be watching. I know PG-13 or R-rated movies. She was really careful about our television influences. So I actually think that it had more to do with my parents just being naive to what was actually available in my school library. So these were my top books. Number 1, Wait Till Helen Comes by Mary Downing Hahn. I've read that book more than any book on the planet, including the Bible. I was obsessed with that book as a kid. Probably read it once a week. I would read it and then finish it and then read it all over again. There was times when I would read it 2 or 3 times in a day. I was obsessed with that book. I have read it several times as an adult, and it still scares the pants off me. Like, it just freaks me right out. So that was number 1. None of my children have been exposed to Wait Till Helen Comes. All right, then the second was the Babysitter's Club series, which I just was obsessed with Babysitter's Club probably up until like 6th grade. And then a lot of things happened in my own life that just like grew me up really fast, right? So the Babysitter's Club became very immature for me, like in the snap of a finger. But it was really good while it lasted. And they made them for long after, 6th grade. So I've only read, I don't even know, maybe the first 25-ish or so. But my 2 youngest daughters have been collecting the Babysitter's Club for years. They have tons of Babysitter's Club books, and they loved them for the longest time. And then I think they've kind of outgrown them, but they still keep them for their own personal nostalgia. And so they've helped me start to rebuild my collection, right? As they find a bunch in the thrift shops, they'll give them to me if they already have them. And so there's a lot of Babysitter's Club books in this house. Maybe I should up that number of 10,000. There might be more down in my little girls' rooms. All right, and then finally, the Sweet Valley High series by Francine, Pascal, and, the other people that wrote under her name. And those are the ones that I definitely should not have been reading at 8, 9, 10 years old. I reread one a few summers ago just to see, and I was like, oh my goodness, like, no wonder I had issues. No wonder I went through some of the things I went through. Just, they are not appropriate. Just don't get any ideas. If you're wondering, yeah, they're not appropriate. And so, but I was obsessed with Jessica and Elizabeth. And Jessica was so cool and Elizabeth was so boring. And then, of course, when I read it a couple of years ago, I was like, wow, Jessica is so messed up. And I kind of feel like Elizabeth. So I don't have like memories of sweet, gentle reads as a kid. I was desensitized really early. And so anything that would have been sweet and gentle, like Anne of Green Gables or, the Frances Hodgson Burnett books, or anything that was just like a sweet, gentle child read, nope, none of that. So I'm rediscovering that stuff in my middle-aged years. And, of course, very much appreciating it and hoping that my, girls will appreciate those as well. All right, and then now comes the homeschooling and parenting questions, which like I said, was actually really surprised that I had so many of these. I have thought about putting homeschooling content on this channel. I actually sat down one day and was just like, can I think of some things to talk about? And I made this list of, no joke, like 150 topics that I could talk about concerning homeschooling. I've been homeschooling for, I think I'm coming into my 24th year, and I have 4 years left. So if that is something that interests you guys, like, let me know. I could maybe just I mostly haven't done it because I know that not all my viewers homeschool, so I didn't want to like put up stuff you guys weren't interested in. But if there's enough interest, maybe I'll just do like one day a week, like Homeschool Friday or something, and put up videos regarding that. If you want, let me know. But here are some questions regarding parenting, homeschooling, and how it aligns with reading. Number 1, are your children big into reading too? What are some of their favorites? So, my kids have been big into reading at various times. I think probably all of my kids have enjoyed reading at one time or another. My boys and my girls. I have 5 girls and 4 boys. And I think they've all, at one point or another, found kind of their niche that they enjoyed reading. But then a lot of times they grew out of it, right? So right now I have 4 that I'm homeschooling, my 4 teens. They're in each year of high school right now. Now, I guess I should say that up until my kids are about 16-ish, I pretty much monitored everything they ever read. So I will look things up on Goodreads or pre-read it myself. When we don't go to the library so much anymore because our libraries around here, like Arkansas passed all these laws where they're very into censorship and they're censoring things or keeping kids from certain books. And while I personally keep my kids from certain books and I definitely censor a ton of things for my kids, I don't like the idea of some other entity doing that for me. And I understand the arguments that not all parents parent well, like I get all that, but I'm just not into censorship. I think that it violates rights and I'm just not into it. It goes down a slippery slope, right? So I think it needs to be left up to the parents and I don't want to talk about it. But when we used to go to the library, the kids would get like a stack of books and then I would just sit in one spot and they'd all come show me their books and I had to go through all of them, right? I was just very careful about what they read. When they get to be about 16, or if they're not quite mature enough at 16, just when they get to the point, right, that I feel like I can sort of turn them loose, I pretty much turn them loose and let them pick out whatever they want. And we have a talk about, hey, what, is honoring to your own self, to your own mind, to your own sensitivity levels, what honors what honors God, what honors your dad and the household and what's allowed in our home. And so please honor that, right? And as far as I know, we haven't really had any issues. My adult daughters at home read whatever they want. I don't even know what they read. But I also have asked them, because I believe in a spiritual atmosphere in your home, so I have asked them to please be aware of that, and I hope that they are. But all that to say, starting with my son, who is 16, he is currently reading things that are like 90s apocalyptic fiction. So we've got like Left Behind series and all the books that came before and after that. We've had conversations about how they might not actually be like super, biblically or theologically sound in all parts of it, but it's just, it's some ideas on what could happen, and some ideas about what people, it's actually a really great, they're so old now that it's kind of like a great little time capsule of what people were thinking, right? In the days when some of the technology that we have now, or the internet was just coming around. Like, what were some of the thoughts around that, around cell phones, around worldwide instant communication and that kind of thing? Anyway, he's really into those. He really likes Frank Peretti's books from like the 90s and early 2000s. So that's what he's reading right now. He's read he really likes just like dystopian stuff, but not super freaky, right? So like The Maze Runner. He's watched The Hunger Games with his older sister, but has not yet read the books. I'm probably going to let him read the books. He's, some of the Jennifer Nielsen, like the False Prince series, that kind of stuff. So just things like that is what he's been reading. My daughter Cynthia, who is 15, she loves Melanie Cellier. She is obsessed. She's talked me into buying her a book every month. And so for the last year, it's been Melanie Cellier every single month. So she loves all of those. They're clean Christian fairy tale retellings. And so she's been reading all of those. There's another series that's kind of like has to do more with like magic and sorcery, I think, by that author that I haven't let her read, but the ones that are fairy tale retellings she's been reading. And so that's the things she likes. She likes Jennifer Nielsen also. And I'm not sure how many of Jennifer Nielsen's books are appropriate for, you know, the way that I'm raising my teens anyway. But I just kind of look at each one, right, that she wants to read and look up the Goodreads and stuff. I've taught my oldest daughter how to go on Goodreads, and like right below where all the star ratings are, there's a search bar. If you guys don't know, I was not aware of this. I just found out about it recently. And you can put things in there, like keywords, right? So I put content, I put scenes, I put, you know, other words that I don't want to say here, just things like that, to see if people have mentioned them in their reviews, which has been extremely helpful. All right, and then my daughter Brenna, who is 13, she right now is just reading Star Wars. She reads Star Wars everything, so she is just pretty much obsessed with Star Wars. She, I don't think, would pick up just anything for the sake of reading it. Like Cynthia would pick up just anything for the sake of reading it, but Brenna's pretty picky. But right now she's loving her Star Wars books. And then Avalon, who is 17, she has been wanting to read like clean romance, so like contemporary romance, and so she's the one that I taught how to use the Goodreads, you know, search thingy, because we just want to be really careful that what she's reading is, you know, clean and not gonna send her down some crazy trails. So and she really wants to be careful about that too, right? So she has a little list of things that she's picked out, so I'm kind of slowly trying to help her build her library. She read the book that Haley Pham put out, and she loved that. For me, that's just not at all the kind of stuff that I read. And so I didn't read it, but me and one of my older adult daughters like massively skimmed through it to see, and then I also watched another a Christian booktuber's review on it. So I was like, okay, well, we'll try this one. Abby said that it was, you know, that I'd probably be fine with her reading it after she read it. So yeah, clean contemporary, mostly, you know, with a romantic element sort of fiction for, you know, Abby, who is 17 and a half. And then of course, you know, there's school stuff, but I'm not super strict about, you have to read this book, you have to finish this book. Like a lot of times I'll be like, hey, you know, this is what I want you to learn about during this season. Here is a book that I think would be really great. Would you give it a try? And if you absolutely hate it, we'll try something else, right? And in approaching it that way, a lot of times they will read further into things than they normally would have, just because they're like, okay, well, I really don't want to read this, but like, I gotta learn this stuff, right? Mom wants me to learn this stuff. I've already finished this much. I might as well keep going. And then they end up finding that it was actually a worthwhile read, right? So I feel like if I treat them with a level of maturity, they're going to rise up to it. And for the most part, that's how it's been. I'll get into more of that in later questions, but that's where we're at for that one. All right, next one. Are or were any of your sons reluctant readers in the teen years? Now, I have been homeschooling long enough, and like I said, I did have a public ministry for a while, that I get this question so often. So many people are looking for help to get their sons reading. And yes, it has been the case in my family that for the most part, my girls have been more into reading than my boys as they grow. If my boys have read as older teens, they've been on a kick, right? Like right now, my son is on that, 90s apocalyptic thing, 90s and early 2000s apocalyptic thing, right? And so when he gets off that kick, will he pick something else up? I don't know. He might be done, right? That might be it, which is fine because I don't push it. Like, they got to read their stuff for school, but if they're Like, I prefer they read, some kind of like a actual storybook, a living book to get information. So for instance, rather than reading a textbook on the experiences of people persecuted during the time of the Holocaust, I'd rather they read something like Number the Stars by Lois Lowry, right? Where they're getting it in a fictional story. Like for my youngers, I'd rather them read like the American Girl books, Felicity's stories of the Revolutionary War time, rather than reading just little textbooks. But there comes a point for some of them where they just don't want to do that anymore, and I don't push it. If they're not readers now, or they're not readers anymore, they're probably not going to be readers in their young adult lives while they're busy trying to establish jobs and homes and relationships and all the things. If reading is not their natural habit, I'm not going to push it. I have found with my 16-year-old son that he was getting frustrating about his school reading because he had so many books to read, and then he'd have to come and narrate, right? He'd have to come and tell me everything he read. It's a Charlotte Mason method of homeschooling, right? Where they read and then they come back and narrate to you and tell you about what they read. And that was just frustrating him to the point where he didn't even want to read anymore. And that's why we had that conversation a while back, a few days ago, where he was like, I love to read, but I don't love to narrate. It stresses me out when I'm reading to think that I'm going to have to parrot back some of this stuff to you. And I just want to read for enjoyment. And I'm just like, okay, you don't have to narrate anymore. Like, it's not going to hurt. If my 16-and-a-half-year-old son doesn't narrate for the next year and a half of his school, it's fine. So next question in that same subject, do you have any book recommendations for older teen boys who don't love reading anymore? And no, I don't. My recommendation, honestly, is just let them stop. Don't push them into reading anymore. I think that we, especially if we love reading ourselves, have romanticized and overinflated the importance of reading for those who can read but just don't enjoy it, right? Of course, I believe we should definitely be literate. Everybody should be literate and able to read an instruction manual, a cookbook, a website. If you need instructions, you need to be able to read them and understand them and implement them, right? Reading comprehension needs to be a thing at some level, but reading for enjoyment, for pleasure, you can't force your hobbies on someone, right? Even if it's your kid. And I think that if they are not enjoying reading as a pastime, don't push it. If they are not enjoying reading as, say you're a homeschooler and as part of their schooling, then cut it down, limit it. I have, with a couple of kids, totally cut out history reading once they hit about 16 or so. And I have made YouTube. I have made a whole curriculum of watching a documentary, YouTube video, something on a historical subject, and then writing an essay response once a week. And I wrote this curriculum out for my daughter, who is now 20, and then now my daughter, who is 17, is using it and loving it. And they're still learning a ton of stuff, right? There's other ways to learn besides reading. And so there's some stuff they still do read, but then there's some stuff that they're learning from other media sources, and it's just fine. I feel like if I push it, that's the final nail in the coffin, right? But if I just leave it open, like, hey, there's other ways for you to learn this. So please read this stuff, but for this stuff, we'll do it this way, right? It's compromise, it's working together, it's letting them be in charge of their education and their hobbies and their free time to some degree, right? But still working within the goals that you have for your kid. Like, there's good ways to compromise, I think, in most situations. All right, and then the last question. What are some of your favorite books to assign your children during homeschooling, especially for the preteen and teen years? So I like to assign them, like I said, I assign them stuff and then we just kind of see if it's going to jive, right? Some nonfiction favorites would be the books by Lee Strobel, like The Case for Christ, The Case for Faith. These are full of real life stories and interviews that Lee Strobel had with people as he was actually going out to try to disprove Christianity. Instead, he ended up proving it. And so these are the stories of his different encounters with people. They're really great. My kids love reading these. I start them reading them about 15 or 16 years old, depending on maturity level. They just read like a little bit each week, maybe like 12 to 15 pages. The Fallacy Detective is a fantastic book for like middle teens. It goes through all kinds of different arguments and, rebuttals that just the fallacy in the way we communicate, and how to recognize different arguments and the problems with them. It's a fantastic critical thinking book. It makes them very interesting. All of my kids have really loved reading The Fallacy Detective. There's these books. I'm going to have to put them up here on the screen because right now my husband and daughter are playing a board game at the table and he's sitting in front of the bookshelf. But that I can't get to them, right? So there are books on like personal finance and government and just different things that you don't really think about needing to know until you need to know them. And I don't know how else to explain them, but I'll put just kind of like a running series of these books up here that some of my kids have just loved. Like my 17-year-old daughter right now really enjoys these books. And then there's this book called Our Island Story, which I have read to all of my children. And it's the story of the history of England. And it's just told in these little, it was published like right around the time that Queen Victoria died. And then, so it only goes up to like Queen Victoria. But I love it. I love doing like different accents because, you've got Scotland and you've got Ireland and you've got like all these different accents. So I don't know. We lay here in my bed and as individuals, just me and one other kid, and we'll lay here and read through that book. And then when they finish it, when we get all done, and it takes like 3 years for us to finish this book, we get all done with it, then I give them their own copy of it. And my adult kids have said it's a special book that they, will always keep. And we just all have special memories of this book that's actually an old, antique book, over 100 years old, but just such a great, one of her sources is Bede. And so then I went and bought the book that Bede actually wrote, his writings, that I'm going to read through on my own too. But it really gave me, especially reading it through as many times as I have, it really gave me a great foundation for understanding the history of England. When I go to England, it has enhanced my travels and studies and research and just everything so much by reading this history of England at this basic child level. Like it was written for grade school classrooms in the late Victorian times. And it's really enhanced, because I'm getting at a basic level. So then when I read things that are a little more meatier, really understanding them well. For fiction, one of my daughters loved the Joan of Arc story by Mark Twain. She learned a lot about Joan of Arc and just that time period through the story that Mark Twain wrote. He also The Prince and the Pauper is a great one for medieval studies. I don't really like Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. I haven't read A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, but I would like to read that one. I haven't actually cared for Mark Twain too much, but I really do think that Joan of Arc and Prince and the Pauper are good ones. And then Little Pilgrim's Progress, which is a retelling of Pilgrim's Progress. My late grade school age kids have loved that book. I think one or two of my older kids read it also as grade school kids and loved it too. Pilgrim's Progress, I don't like those kinds of stories, like allegorical kind of fantasy-ish. Like I don't like those kind of stories, so I might have read Pilgrim's Progress like years ago, but I'm not that interested in reading it, but my kids love it. These books by Rosemary Sutcliffe, she retells the Iliad and the Odyssey, and they have been favorites of my kids. They loved them, and they're a really great basis for further reading in English literature, right? Knowing those stories. My daughter recently finished the Screwtape Letters, my 17-year-old daughter. She loved the Screwtape Letters. I read the Screwtape Letters at like 30 years old and didn't understand it at all. I had reading comprehension issues. So I don't know if I like it, but she loved it. She adored it. I really prefer like living books, like I said, stories that tell the history of something rather than a textbook that tells the basic facts of something. Most of my homeschooling years, I have taught the kids from living books. Like we've read the story and then we've, learned, then we might read some other, nonfiction books or picture books or short, whatever nonfiction things that surround that story and time period. But this year I told my kids, you guys can pick. You guys don't have to do it that way if you don't want to anymore. I understand, you guys are all older teenagers. This doesn't work for everybody. So half of them are sticking with the Charlotte Mason literature-based way. So my son and then my youngest daughter, and then my oldest daughter and my other daughter, and then my other two daughters went to go the textbook route. And my oldest daughter, my daughter who's 17, who's graduating, I think just wants to do it because she just wants to get done and move on with her life. But my other daughter, she's doing it that way because she wants to be more independent. And if she does a living book, then she's got to narrate to me at this point in life. And so she doesn't want to do that. But anyway, that's it. That's my questions. And it was so much fun. I really enjoyed sharing all that stuff with you guys and thinking through the questions and trying to come up with, answers that are good and helpful and stuff I haven't said before. So if you didn't get a chance to leave a question on my Q&A posts, you guys can leave a question. And when I get, 5 or 6 questions, I'll put together another Q&A if you guys want. So hope everybody's doing well and have a great day, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye.